Bill C-18 was just the beginning. Carney has hinted that his Liberal government will bring back some iteration of Trudeau's tyrannical, there's no other word for it, Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 50 of Jonny Says So. And today, I have a very important topic I'd like to discuss, one that may even affect my ability to do this show going into the future, and the ability of thousands of content creators across the country, like myself, to make their voices heard. Now, by now, we're all too familiar with what happens when the Canadian government decides that they want to get involved with the free distribution of information on the internet. This image that you're seeing right here is exactly what you're going to see when you try to simply share a news article on social media. Now, this, of course, is the result of Bill C-18, or the Online News Act, which aimed to make things fair for news organizations because they felt that Facebook was somehow profiting off of their work. Now, this doesn't pass the sniff test, guys, because it's quite obvious that when you share a link to a news article on social media, people who want to read more are going to click the link and drive traffic to the news website. But now, that's not happening. And while organizations like CBC have reported a slight boost in website traffic, smaller news organizations have had a very difficult time trying to get their message across. Now, unfortunately, guys, Bill C-18 was just the beginning. Carney has hinted that his Liberal government will bring back some iteration of Trudeau's tyrannical, there's no other word for it, Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, which sounds well-intentioned, protecting children on the internet. But if you read through the bill, you'll see there are all sorts of Orwellian provisions that will allow anonymous reporting of social media posts and even imprisonment for wrongthink. There was a very telling moment on the campaign trail where Mark Carney really tipped his hand as to the true motivations of the Online Harms Act. Rebel News put this out. PM Mark Carney used a heckler's interruption to justify online censorship, blaming the United States for a sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, conspiracy theories, describing it as a pollution that washes over our borders. It's very interesting that he used this moment where he was heckled about Jeffrey Epstein to talk about how he's going to pass legislation to protect us from the internet. Let's listen.
We need to do it because earlier today, I'll get back to Trump and trade and everything, because we can't avoid it. But earlier today, we announced a series of measures on crime. And we announced a series of measures with respect to online harm and other factors.
It's very interesting that he uses this moment to talk about crime and online harms, implying that this very narrative that somebody shouted out should be criminalized.
One of the observations we had, one of the issues we're dealing with, there's many serious issues that we're dealing with respect to crimes of violence, conjugal violence, drugs, fentanyl, others. But one of them is with respect to really just the sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, conspiracy theories, this sort of pollution that's online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States.
Again, my problem with all of this is who gets to define what a conspiracy theory is? We all saw in real time during COVID-19 things that are now undeniable were being censored from all major social media platforms, including YouTube, under the guise that they were harmful conspiracy theories. I don't think Mark Carney or anybody else should, for that matter, should be the arbiter of what's true and what's false, what needs to be censored and what doesn't.
And that's a mild version of that. That's fine. I can take the conspiracy theory and all that. But the more serious things is when it affects how people behave in our society. When Canadians are threatened threaten going to their community centers or their places of worship or their schools, or God forbid when it affects our children. So,
now I agree with that. God forbid when it affects our children. But that's not what we're talking about. He used this moment as a way to let you know that he is very uncomfortable with any challenge to his narrative or any sort of question of his character. We also have ex-environment minister will now be supervising the implementation of the Online Streaming Act, another piece of legislation that really seeks to clamp down on what Canadians can and can't say on the internet. Now, Stephen Guilbeault and other members of the Liberal government have vehemently denied that there is any sort of provisions in these bills that will affect Canadians' ability to express themselves freely on the internet. But privacy watchdogs and even members of the legacy media, or anybody who's bothered to even read the legislation, would disagree. Now, Guilbeault has been very shaky on camera and nervous when he's been asked to defend any of this. So let's take a look.
There was a clause saying that that would not be touched. That clause was removed. The groundswell of concern is about something called user-generated content, people posting things. If I post something that's described as a program, if I post it, you're saying there's never going to be any scrutiny, anything that will affect that?
No, I think the concern is that there are people who believe that there should be no laws when it comes to the internet. We should not regulate Facebook or YouTube or Google, whether it's on to ensure that they pay their fair share on cultural content, or that when it comes to hate speech and
pay their fair share with cultural content. What exactly does that even mean?
And incitement to violence and terrorism. We see how what happens if there's no control in the U.S. on Capitol Hill on January 6th, and so those I see those I recognize that this is a position that people have. I disagree with it. I think that there needs to be regulation for these web giants, just like we have regulations
right.
for
we're not
every
right.
other kinds of,
but we're not,
industry.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's granted. And we all agree, we're agreeing on the basic principles. But why?
No, I don't think so.
No,
a lot of people
okay, but
who
no,
are
I'm
criticizing
in
this
terms of my
bill
question, though. In terms of my question, though, you've clarified saying you're going to make it, your changes are going to make it crystal clear that
it's already there in the bill.
Commercial content would be the only thing regulated, and yet we have this concern about self-generated content. So you're saying that all of these concerns that have been expressed by experts are unfounded?
Well, they've been those experts that have spoken are those type of people that believe that there should be no regulations on the internet. There've been a number of experts just today.
Those experts are the type of people that believe there should be no regulation on the internet. So, in other words, he's dismissing people that have genuine concern that their opinions might be silenced by the government. Not a good start here.
Two law professors, broadcasting experts, half of the Yale panel that actually did the consultations over 2 years to what led us to propose Bill C-10 came out in support of it. We've seen artistic, cultural organization, Musicians Guild, independent producers, Writers Guild come out in support of Bill C-10. There's a lot of support for Bill C-10, and there are those people who don't think we should be doing that.
Well, so why then the change 3 weeks ago when your Liberal Parliamentary Secretary introduced this change, which removed, there was a clause that said self-generated content, things that are posted by individuals would not be touched or affected by this legislation. That was removed, and hence the concern by individuals saying if you're removing that, then it would leave things open for self-generated, self-posted content to be regulated eventually or potentially. You're saying, and you've even responded to it by saying, no, I'm going to make it crystal clear with changes to the Act that won't happen. So you're saying this is all now a creation of people's unrealistic
Well,
rules?
I mean, so your first question is why remove it?
The clause
because
that was removed 3
too,
weeks ago, yeah.
It was too broad, and it would have excluded YouTube from the legislation. And we don't think YouTube today is the largest distributor of music in Canada, and
YouTube also has a very robust copyright system. So This legislation is not needed to protect copyrighted Canadian work. I don't know if you guys have any experience with YouTube, but I have to be very careful with the clips that I put up. Even background music will cause me to have to edit the video and sometimes remove an entire segment or try to remove the background music myself. So this argument does not hold water.
They make a lot of money out of it, and we think that just like any other Canadian broadcasters, music stations, TV stations, they should be investing some of the revenues they generate in Canada in our musicians, in our creators. And as I said, if you only look at one...
Now this is going to have the opposite effect that they supposedly intend for this. Just take a look at the Meta News ban, for instance. They were hoping that they were going to generate revenue from Facebook and Instagram when they have to pay because Canadians want to share news articles that they're concerned about. But Meta naturally just said, well, no, we're just not going to show the news, period. And what happens if YouTube decides to do the same? I think this could hurt Canadian creators in the long run. Now, it's not just members of the media that have taken Guilbeault to task for this, but you guys might remember back when we had something of a functioning democracy in this country where stuff like this could be debated in Parliament. Well, here's MP from Lethbridge, Rachel Thomas, absolutely grilling Guilbeault about this draconian legislation.
Net neutrality is the principle that internet users should have equal access to all sites, all content, and all applications without being blocked or having preference given to certain sites over others. In 2017, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he would defend net neutrality, and the previous Heritage Minister made net neutrality a foundational part of Canadian cultural policy. So why is it that the current Heritage Minister is now going against this principle by legislating that some content gets to be showcased and other content has to be downgraded in order to show favoritism to some artists over others?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe there's some misconception about the concept of net neutrality since it refers to the hardware, to Canadians and people being able to have access to the internet, and that these conditions be the same to all internet users. Bill C-10 is not about telecommunications or hardware, Mr. Speaker. It's about ensuring that web giants pay their fair share and that Canadians have easy access to the content developed by a Canadian creator, Mr. Speaker.
No, that's not correct at all. Net neutrality absolutely does cover legislation by governments that attempt to block what users can and can't do or access on the internet. This argument is completely asinine.
Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
The minister reads his speaking notes very well, but what he's saying is actually really misleading toward the Canadian public and actually quite insulting to their intelligence. Net neutrality ensures that all internet users are treated fairly. The Liberals, they once believed this principle. Now, as stated, they'll say Bill C-10 has to do with web giants, but that's actually not the case. We're talking about a bill that targets everyday Canadians in their everyday internet use. We're talking about regulating the internet. Everything from YouTube to Facebook to TikTok, etc. It's unfair, it's undemocratic, and it's incredibly regressive.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, a profound misconception by the Honourable Member opposite. We're not regulating the internet, Mr. Speaker. We're regulating some activities on internet. There's a huge difference.
To me, there doesn't seem to be a huge difference. We're not regulating the internet, we're regulating some activities on the internet. This is just useless semantics. These people think we're so stupid.
Bill C-10 does not affect how internet service providers manage internet traffic and does not modify the relevant provision in the Telecommunications Act, therefore maintaining net neutrality, Mr. Speaker.
I want to remind Mr. Couric that interrupting, especially during question period, is not permitted. The Honourable Member for Lethbridge.
So basically what the minister is saying is, don't worry, folks, discrimination is okay as long as it's approved by the government. I'll do it right. No, the government cannot and should not be trusted to regulate what we access online. I'm talking about successful YouTubers like Simply Nailogical or Justin Bieber, who came up through YouTube, or Lily Singh, a famous YouTuber right now. I'm talking about individuals who are innovative, creative, and inspiring. They use these platforms in order to gain an audience and influence culture. So why are the Liberals so intent on picking winners and losers instead of letting Canadian artists continue?
The Honourable Minister.
Without government interference?
Thank you. Again, profound misconception about what we're trying to do. In fact, the Department of Justice has stated that there's no problem within free speech and C10. And the member opposite was at the committee. She got to ask questions from the minister.
So, in other words, we investigated ourselves and we found we've done nothing wrong.
Of Justice himself regarding this. What we want to do, and frankly, what I can't understand is why does the Conservative Party of Canada continue to oppose the fact that we're asking some of the wealthiest companies in the world to pay their fair share when it comes to Canadian artists, Canadian musicians, Mr. Speaker? I just don't understand.
Because they shouldn't have to pay their fair share. That would be my answer to it. It's like going back to the Online News Act. Like, for better or for worse, the internet has changed the way that we distribute information. An analogy that I would like to draw is, look at the turn of the 20th century. The automobile industry drastically changed how people get around. So obviously some industries were hurt by the natural evolution of human progress and the automobile. So imagine if you manufactured horse carriages or components for horse carriages or buggy whips. Yeah, buggy whips used to be something that everybody needed because they needed to whip the horses to get their wagons going. Now, could you just imagine if the government had passed legislation demanding that Henry Ford subsidize the buggy whip industry? This is the kind of lunacy that we are talking about here. So there you have it. Mark Carney and Stephen Guilbeault seem to be hell-bent on passing legislation that will have a huge chilling effect on freedom of expression in this country. It's something we should all be concerned about and keep our eyes on very closely. So that's my show for today, guys. Now I'd like to take this as an opportunity to remind you to support independent channels like this one. So if you like what you see, subscribe and share the videos and smash the like button. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.